Good day, I'm Eva Wong from HappyLand Psychology and Therapy Center in Johor Bahru, Malaysia. Today I'll be sharing key insights from my literature review titled Cybersex as a Digital Intimacy Phenomenon, Psychological Drivers, Behavioral Risks, and Dual Impact Outcomes. This work synthesized research from 1997 to 2024, looking at cybersex not only as a problem, but as a complex, double-edged digital intimacy practice with both risks and potentials. Human sexual behavior has always evolved with technology and social change. The internet has pushed this even further, shifting part of the sexuality from purely face-to-face encounter to text, images, live video, and even virtual reality. In this context, cybersex refers to sexual interaction mediated through digital platforms where people can experience psychological and physiological arousal without physical contact. It is increasingly common, but reactions are polarized. Some see it as a very dangerous and addictive behavior. Others view this as a new space for explorations and intimacy. My study tries to hold both sides together. This review was guided by 3 research questions. First, what psychological motive actually drive individuals to engage in cybersex? It is really just for fun? Second, how does cybersex relate to behavioral dependency and detachment from real-life relationships? And third, in what way does cybersex produce both positive and negative impact? And what are the implications for education, psychology, and clinical work? This was the qualitative literature review. I searched SciInfo, PubMed, Google Scholar, as well as specialist journal and conference papers. The time frame was from 1997 to 2024, starting with Copper foundational work. I included studies that focus on interactive cybersex rather than passive phonological use and that examine psychological or behavioral impact like dependency, emotional regulation, intimacy, and relational detachment. The analysis was guided by sexological and psychological lenses to capture both risk and potential benefit. I think it is very useful to clarify what we mean by cybersex. Cybersex is interactive. People are co-constructing sexual scenarios via chat, images, video, or virtual environment. There are 4 key features stand out: anonymity, immediacy, interactivity, and global search. This allows individuals to enter sexual and emotional space quickly and often with reduced shame or fear of judgment. In this review, I treat cybersex as a digital intimacy phenomenon, a way of connecting, regulating emotions, and exploring identity, not just a set of sexual acts. Let's look at the finding. The first finding is that cybersex is really driven by sexual impulses alone. Many users turn to cybersex for emotional regulation, managing loneliness, stress, boredom, or unmet intimacy needs. The anonymity of online space reduce shame and encourage self-disclosure. This linked to Suley's ideas of the online disinhibition effect, where people say and do things online they never attempt offline. Cybersex also functions as a space for explorations and identity work. This is especially relevant for adolescents and sexual minorities who may face stigma in their offline context. So, motivation ranges from simple curiosity and play to coping, validation seeking, or escapism. Understanding the motive is crucial to understanding the outcome. From a sexological perspective, several risks emerge. Repeated exposure to high-intensity digital stimuli can elevate arousal threshold, Some users then find offline sex less satisfying, or they need more extreme content to feel aroused. There can be stimulus escalation, seeking increasingly intense or taboo material to maintain the same level of excitement, mirroring patterns we see in behavioral addictions. For some, online practice spill into offline risky behavior, such as anonymous encounters or multiple partners. Ethically, cybersex carries risks of manipulation, deceptive identity, non-consensus recording, and sextortion, all of which may cause severe psychological or relational harm. Psychologically, cybersex can become part of the powerful reinforcement cycle. A person feels lonely, turns to cybersex, gains short-term pleasure and connection, but later returns to loneliness or shame, so they repeat the behavior. Over time, this can lead to dependency, especially when there are no alternative coping strategies. Computer-mediated communications also amplify idealizations. With limited cues, people tend to fill in the blank and create hyper-personal intimacy. When online fantasy collides with offline reality, the gap can lead to anxiety, disappointment, or even self-doubt. Finally, privacy violations are a serious concern. Once images or video are shared, they can be stored, forwarded, or used for harassment. The resulting humiliations or fear can resemble trauma response. However, the literature is equally clear that cybersex is not purely harmful. From a sexological lens, cybersex can provide a safer space to explore fantasy, roles, and sexual orientation without physical risk of pregnancy or sexually transmitted infection. It also contributes to more diverse and less stigmatized sexual culture. From a psychological perspective, cybersex can offer temporary emotional support, a sense of companionship, and a space to practice communications or boundaries. For individuals with sexual anxiety or history of trauma, carefully bounded online intimacy can be a stepping stone towards rebuilding trust. And although rare, some online sexual connections do develop into authentic, stable, offline relationships. Bringing these threads together, cybersex clearly operates as a double-edged digital intimacy phenomenon. It is neither pathological nor universally beneficial. Outcomes usually depends on why people use it, how they use it, and in what context they are using it. The very features that make cybersex feel safe, anonymity, controllability, distant, can simultaneously create risk. They can support gentle exploration, or they can facilitate avoidance, dependency, and exploitation. So instead of asking, is cybersex good or bad? It is more useful and beneficial to ask, for this person at this time, serving what function and under what condition. I think this finding have very important implication. For clinicians, we need to move beyond simply telling clients to stop. Instead, we explore what role does cybersex play in their emotional life. Is it a coping strategy, a habit, or just an addiction-like pattern? Intervention can then focus on emotional regulations, boundary setting, consent, and rebuilding offline relationship competence. For trauma survivors, this means very sensitive, trauma-informed work around shame and trust. For educators, cybersex should be part of the comprehensive digital sexuality education, and this includes talking about consent, privacy, digital footprints, but also acknowledging why people are drawn to this space so that young people feel informed, not judged. There are also clear limitations in the existing literature. Definitions of cybersex vary. Some include sexting or solo porn, others restrict it to interactive activities. This makes comparison very difficult. Most studies are cross-sectional and rely on self-report data, which are vulnerable to memory bias or social desirability. Research is heavily Western-centric, with relatively little from Asian or non-Western contexts, where culture, religions, and gender norms may shape digital intimacy very differently. We also lag behind technological change. VR intimacy, AI companions, and haptic devices are only beginning to be studied. And there may be publication bias. Problem stories are more likely to be published, which can skew the overall picture. Future directions needs to catch up with reality. We need cross-cultural and social structural studies that consider religions, stigma, platform regulations, and access. We also need a study which is crucial to understand how cybersex involvement evolves over time, when it stays exploratory or when it's become problematic. We also need to examine immersive technologies like AI-mediated intimacy more closely, as they are already reshaping how people experience closeness. On the applied side, we should design and evaluate therapeutic and educational programs that is explicitly include digital intimacy. And finally, we need updated theoretical model that integrate motivation, connections, emotions, and technology in a more dynamic way. To conclude, this review suggests that cybersex is best understood as a digital intimacy practice rather than simply a deviant behavior. It is driven by emotional needs, sexual curiosity, and identity work. And its impact is genuine dual. It can provide emotional comfort, explorations, and even healing for some, while creating dependency, desensitization, relational distortions, and trauma for others. Our challenge as a researcher, clinicians, and educator is to engage with this phenomenon in a balanced and compassionate way, recognizing both the risk and the potential, and supporting people to navigate digital intimacy and awareness, boundaries, and care. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll be happy to take any questions or suggestions, especially on how cybersex and digital intimacy in your own clinical, educational, or research context. You are welcome to contact me after this session.